So by now you should be pretty familiar with this Redshift dashboard. And if you have followed along with any of the demos, you have at least connected with a JDBC driver or an ODBC driver, but maybe not both. Either way, we're going to dig into both just a little bit deeper here so that you're comfortable implementing either JDBC or ODBC. Because as you use Redshift, chances are you're going to end up having to rely on both of them for different purposes. Now, when we initially set up our cluster, we stated that we didn't want a public-facing IP address, meaning we didn't want a dedicated IP for this cluster resource. Mainly, I just did that to save cost, because I can have a public-facing endpoint which basically serves the same purpose. Maybe it's just a little bit more wordy. If you do want to establish an IP address, that is definitely something you can do, and then that IP address would serve the same function that this endpoint does. It basically just identifies a unique resource out on the internet that you can connect to. Now, the protocol that you're going to talk back and forth with that resource across is either going to be JDBC or ODBC. From a very high level, the difference being that JDBC is more for a Unix or a Java or a script or code-based approach. JDBC stands for Java Database Connectivity. It is based on the Java language and is very compatible with all your other technologies that rely heavily on Java. Meanwhile, ODBC, Open Database Connectivity, is much more standard in your kind of Windows desktop environment. Now, non-Windows systems such as Unix or Mac support ODBC, just like Windows systems happily support JDBC. So where do I go if I want to dig in and find out a little bit more about how to leverage and use both JDBC and ODBC, as well as download the drivers needed in order to use both of these technologies? Well, the answer comes again as a reference to the Amazon Redshift documentation right on AWS. If you simply search connect to Redshift cluster in either Bing or Google or whatever your favorite search engine is, this page right here should be within one of the top 2 or 3 pages listed in your search engine. You can also just simply go to docs.aws.amazon.com/redshift and pretty much navigate to it right from there as well. Specific to ODBC, if we click this link, it shows the different topics that we have at hand. And if I'm selecting an ODBC driver, chances are I want a Windows system. So I'll go ahead and click on that. But do note you have it available for Mac and Linux as well. So here are the driver downloads available for ODBC. Now this is an MSI, so it wants to install something on my Windows desktop. That installation dialog is pretty straightforward and self-explanatory. If I click next here, you'll see that my only options are repair or remove because I've already installed it. So I'm going to go ahead and click cancel, but if you had selected install, you'd basically end up at this screen right here. Just click finish and you're done. What that driver allows me to do when I open up the ODBC Data Source Administrator, which you can find by just going to your Windows search box and typing in ODBC, should be one of the first things that pops up. What this ODBC administrator allows us to do is have stored data source names, both for user level names and system level names. Meaning I could set up drivers for only when I'm logged in, or for when anyone on this system is logged in. You click Add New, and this shows all the ODBC drivers that are currently installed. Because we ran that MSI, Amazon Redshift driver is already available and ready to go. Now, throughout my previous demos, we've been using heavily Workbench J, which uses JDBC. But there's lots of other SQL clients out there. For example, I'm using one here called Valentina Studio. They have a free version that you can download online, and it has all the basic uses that I would want out of a good SQL client. Connecting to my new Redshift cluster is usually as simple as opening a new connection and then selecting an ODBC resource. It already knows that I have one named Abacos DW, so I'll go ahead and select that. And if I hadn't configured it, I could do that by clicking Configure here. And what I enter on the server, I just enter that endpoint. Port is 5439, name of the database, and then my username and password. You can see it has all my tables, and if I wanted to go into one table, it would show me all my columns as well. But more what I'm interested in is establishing a connection with a SQL editor. So I'll switch over into SQL mode. You can still see I have my tables here for reference. I'm going to run just a simple query. How about select star from dim product? Now, if you remember, we entered a whole lot of products, so maybe I'll limit that to maybe only the top 100 returns. The Valentina Studio hands that query through the ODBC driver up to the Redshift cluster. The Redshift cluster returns the data to that ODBC driver, and then ODBC gives it back to the Valentina Studio in a way that it can be consumed here. Well, what might that look like behind the scenes? Well, if we go back to our Redshift cluster, we can actually see our query history. Now, we'll use this a lot later, and we'll especially use this feature when we have that add-on course that focuses on performance, because this is a great place to see what's been running against your server and kind of dig in and see the resources that have been used, as well as the query plan. So we see 3 queries that have run. You see the 2 times that I was using the Valentina Studio to navigate the schema. Those were queries that Valentina Studio generated on its own, and then my select star from dim product, limit 100. I can go in and get details on that, and this is where you would see the query plan. But what's interesting to note is that ODBC isn't doing a lot on the passing side. When I write my SQL query, ODBC passes it along pretty much exactly as I wrote it. The return results probably make that ODBC driver do just a little bit more work. But some of the other things that ODBC driver handles is all the compatibility nuances between one SQL language and another. They're all based on the ANSI standard, but they all have their own nuances as well.